And now let me introduce my buddy Bruce Townshend from ESGR, who is going to lead our next panel on military training for your employees, the National Guard and Reserves. Take it away, Bruce.
All right. Hey, thanks, George, and good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here and to be working with you all today. I know we have a limited amount of time, and I want to leave the maximum amount of time for the folks on this panel to impart their expertise. So I'm going to introduce our panel members very briefly. First up, we have Mr. Michael Bianchi. Michael is the Senior Director for Education and Career Training, and he works for my favorite institutions, the Institute for Veterans and Military Families, the IVMF, and he's currently at Syracuse University. We also have Lacey Galanka. Lacey works for Excel Energy. She's Inclusion and Diversity Consultant for Veterans and Diversity there. We have Jim Moorbach, the Vice President of Field and Government Recruiting from Werner Enterprises. And I have James Tongate, I'm sorry about that, James, the Vice President of Government Relations for Benelink. So let me jump right into this. The first question is going to go to Jim Moorbach. Jim, your company, Werner Enterprises, was one of the winners of what we call the prestigious Secretary of Defense Employer Support Freedom Award in 2018. That award is awarded from ESGR and through the Secretary of Defense. This shows an already outstanding commitment on the part of your company to support its employees who serve in the reserve component. Could you please expand, and this is a long question, I'm glad I gave you a copy ahead of time. Could you expand on some of the specific policies and initiatives that Werner put in place and which would be most beneficial to both the members of the military, the reserve component members, and the company? And further, what in your mind is the most important in balancing a career in a private sector career and staying an active member in the reserve component of the military? There you go.
All right. Thank you, Bruce. Thanks for the opportunity to allow me to be here today, man. I really appreciate it. You know, first of all, everything starts off with the culture of your organization. I mean, our vice chairman, president, and CEO, Derek Leathers, he's made it clear for years that our nearly 10,000 professional drivers that travel over 3.5 million miles a day are the center of our company. You know, he also says loud and clear that there isn't enough we could ever do to show how much we appreciate the men and women who serve our country in the armed forces. You know, Werner, we're extremely proud that our veteran population comprises approximately 20% of our total workforce worldwide. You know, in addition to great pay and benefits, you know, what's most beneficial to our service members and our organization is Werner has a military-specific initiative that we call Operation Freedom. You know, there are a lot of components to this program, but bottom line, we are committed to taking care of our veterans and their families. You know, there are so many parallels between serving your country in the military by protecting our way of life and serving your country as a professional driver by delivering essential goods to the American people. At Werner, very similar to the military. You know, drivers begin their career with industry-leading training. You know, once completed, they begin driving on one of our over 200 different driving accounts that they choose and that best fits their needs and their needs of their family. You know, from there, it's a limitless career path, you know, full of opportunities. You know, we have 15 terminals throughout the United States. You know, he'd be a professional driver, freedom truck driver, road team captain, safety specialist, field recruiter, terminal manager, IT analyst, executive. I mean, it's up to them. You know, it's their career path. You know, innovation is crucial. You know, Werner developed the industry's first Department of Labor and VA apprenticeship program for truck drivers and mechanics. You know, in the program, veterans who choose to enroll are eligible to receive up to $25,000 of their tax-free benefits in addition to Werner pay if they have VA educational benefits available. You know, we have a fleet of Freedom trucks that have military-themed wraps and are driven by veterans to show all Americans how proud we are of our service members and their families while they haul America's goods down our highways. You know, we have a strong partnership with the nonprofit organization RED, which stands for Remember Everyone Deployed. You know, we reach out to our deployed and mobilized members of the National Guard and Reserve, and we let them know that we're thinking about them and if there's anything we can help them with while they're deployed. You know, addressing that last part of your question about regarding balancing a career in the private sector and the reserve component of the military. Because our Operation Freedom team is comprised of veterans, we understand the challenges of transitioning and balancing military service, family, and civilian work. My military background includes service in the active duty and National Guard. So I've been there, I've done that, and I understand those challenges. Service members in the National Guard and Reserve, they have a challenging task, balancing their civilian life with their military life, family, work, country. It can be demanding, and the service member can be pulled in many directions at the same time. Warner is very accommodating and supportive of that. But my best advice for the service member is to be organized and time management. Be sure to communicate your military obligations to your employer. In return, make sure your supervisor understands your commitment and supports you. In addition to the Freedom Award, Warner has been awarded 12 ESGR Patriot Awards, which were submitted by our professional drivers and associates, due to the exceptional support their Warner supervisors gave them while they were serving our country on military orders. At the end of the day, it's a partnership, it's a culture, it's camaraderie, and it's our American duty to fully support the men and women in the National Guard and Reserves to ensure they successfully fulfill their military obligations while maintaining a successful full-time civilian career. So thanks, Bruce.
Oh, thank you, Jim. Within Werner, is there an employee resource group that's specifically for veterans or serving Guard and Reserve members?
Yes, that's as part of our Operation Freedom. We have a group of veteran associates who actually are there to process the apprenticeship paperwork to the VA Department of Labor. Also there to support members that are associates and drivers while they're deployed. They reach out to them, reach out to their families, and any other questions. You're serving the National Guard, you have a lot of commitments. I have a lot of folks here I know that, it's not just a 1 week in a month, 2 week a year thing. We know that. It's going to be, you got to leave on a Thursday for your unit training assembly, and you come back on, Monday for work. So we got to work around their schedules, and we got to support them, and Warner 100% does that. So, then any other type of issues that veterans might face while they're working here that our team can help with.
All right, thank you, Jim. The reason I asked specifically about an employee resource group, ESGR is itself sort of a great big employee resource group for any member of the Guard or the Reserve, no matter what industry they work in, and no matter which branch they serve in, whether it's the National Guard or the Reserve of any of the main forces. ESGR started in 1970, which is the same time went to an all-volunteer force. And we realized in the country at the time, we needed a network there to support that reserve component. And today, for everybody who is the reserve component makes up approximately 40% of the total force of the United States military. The active component, they're the first responders and they do a great job, but they simply cannot sustain all of the operations that the U.S. military is tasked to do without the help of the reserve component. And most of you know that since November of 2001, our reserves have been mobilized and activated continuously now for almost 19 solid years. And we recognize that that can be a strain on private industry. So the next question comes up for Lacey Galanka. Lacey, hey, good morning. We've seen a lot of innovative ways that companies, large and small, can both accommodate the needs of their reserve component employees and still maintain that bottom line of doing business. What support resources have you and Excel Energy used to assist you in developing and implementing those innovations and policies? And what can you share about how Excel follows the law known as USERRA, the Uniformed Services and Employment and Reemployment Rights Act, both in the letter of the law and the spirit?
Awesome. Well, I will first start off with, I'm a National Guards person myself. I actually just came back from Afghanistan last summer. So the company actually had about the summer of 2017 to the summer 2018 to summer 2019 without me. There's some really great innovative ways we can fill those roles, such as my own inclusion and diversity role while I was deployed. And I'll talk about those in a second, but there's kind of a number of things that we can do as companies to support Guard and Reservists, right? And one of the things was We originally offered 6 months of what we call differential pay. So that's the difference of pay from a serving member's base pay to what they would make at the company. So we want to make sure that if they're doing a duty to the country and they volunteered for the service, that they're not actually losing any money when they go off to do any of these annual trainings, whether they have an extended drill weekend, you know, their officer or their NCO training or anything like that. So we want to make sure that they get differential pay. We also make sure that they continue their health benefits so that even though they get put on TRICARE, if they would still like to have their dependents on any of our civilian care, that we can do that as well. And we used to offer those benefits for 6 months. In my 16 years in the Guard, what I've realized is no deployment or active duty time frame is 6 months, right? Every time you go to deploy, you're looking at least a year of active duty time. So what we've done is we've extended that out to 2 years of differential pay and then 2 years of keeping all of your health benefits and things to that nature. The other thing we notice is when folks go out on military paid time off, meaning they have annual training days, those required 15 days of annual training, that we had to pause their paycheck, work up the differential pay, restart their paycheck, and sometimes there was a gap in between those time frames. So what we also added to our military benefits is 15 days of what we call military paid time off days. And for any Guard or reservist, they consider this what we call double dipping. So we just continue their paycheck like they would regular PTO, but they're military paid time off days so that when they do go for their 2 weeks annual training, we don't have to pause their pay, do a calculation, a differential, restart their pay, and create this gap in potential pay. So we've done those. This is a basic type of benefits that we do offer. And again, we've extended those for 2 years. Some really good news stories are for employees that we had that were current employees not serving. We had somebody that decided, hey, now that we have these benefits for 2 years, I would like to join the National Guard. How do I do that? And would I still be eligible for these benefits? And they would be. So as soon as they start their boot camp and their job training, they go on to the 2-year differential pay. We'll continue to pay them their differential even while they're in training, not just while they are deployed. And then some of the other things that we do to help in that kind of when you transition to going away for a deployment, so longer, it will say more than 31 days of time, we've created a checklist both for the employer as well as the employee so that that leader and that manager can make sure that they go through, hey, have we covered all the bases, tied up the loose ends, and there's not a lot of confusion as to what they need to get covered before they take off for that deployment. As far as USERRA goes, we definitely obviously abide by the rules as far as hiring, rehiring, maintaining those positions. Some really innovative ways we've looked at doing that is sometimes we hire outside contractors and sometimes we do some internal kind of what we call career building, right? So for myself as a consultant, I had a recruiter that was very interested in consulting roles. So they actually did a temporary fill position internally within the company. They got to experience the consultant role. They were within the company. They had growth and development so that they took that kind of experiential role. So that's another innovative way that you can look at potentially filling these roles as service members are deployed. And the other thing I would do is really that culture, as Jim had mentioned before, right? Having that culture, not just saying, hey, we like to hire veterans, but we like to make sure we foster that environment once they are with the company, that they want to stay there. And what we do is we do partner with the ESGR a lot. We do the statement of support signings. We definitely also love to do boss lifts. So each of our states generally will have boss lifts. And for those that aren't familiar, on occasion, they'll have C-130s, Chinooks, Blackhawks, and they'll bring out some of the senior leaders from companies. They get to actually fly in some of these wonderful military aircrafts, and then they actually get to see what a National Guard and reservist would do on their drill weekend. So it's really kind of eye-opening for those employers to understand what they put into just a drill weekend, that they think, hey, it's 2 days, but you're really working for 12 days straight. So they get a little bit more exposure to that. So boss lifts have been fantastic in that aspect. And then as far as National Guard and reservists that are deployed as well, we do have a business resource group. We do make sure that they get together, they fill out a form, a support form, if you will. If they have their address, we'll send them care packages. And then also we have any support for any of their dependents that are home. We've done things like help painting homes, helping spouses move, and helping dependents in schools or anything like that. So we have a support form so that when the employee is deployed, we can also offer help to any of their dependents that may be back home.
Lacey, thank you very much for bringing up the boss lift. You you just segued me right into another piece that I was about to bring up. For those of you who are watching and listening today, Lacey really kind of said it all very well. A Boss Lift is an event sponsored by ESGR, usually at the state level in whatever state the event is happening in, and they work in conjunction with whether it's the National Guard, the Air National Guard, or a reserve unit in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, or even the Coast Guard. We've done those before. And it's simply a way to get the employers of our reserve component service members out there to see what an actual what a training event looks like in most cases, what your men and women who are serving in the reserve component do when they're not working for you and your company. So Lacey, thank you very much for bringing that up. I just posted the ESGR website on the chat for everybody. It's very simple. It's esgr.mil. ESGR is a program of the Department of Defense. I am a federal government employee in that regard. And most of our ESGR volunteers are just that. They work, there's almost 3,000 of us across the country, but they work on their own time and for their own dime as volunteers on those state committees with ESGR. So this leads me to my next question. And this one is going to go to James Tongate. And we're, as you all know, and Carr brought it up very eloquently this morning as we kicked off, that we are working in an alternate universe right now with the COVID-19 pandemic. So James, this one is for you. With the COVID-19 pandemic, it's completely disrupted much of how we do business as usual here in the United States for a lot of industries and companies, whether they're large or small. But it's also had an indelible impact on how the reserve component service members go about their weekend assemblies, those battle drills. So if you will, in what ways have you seen this cause the need for change in how your company supports the reserve component employees, and what impact COVID has had, if any, on reaching out to and hiring veterans and reserve component service members?
Well, thank you, and good morning, everyone. Appreciate it. Great question, by the way, Bruce. So we, like most companies, had to learn how to pivot to that virtual environment. And as a member of the Kentucky Air National Guard, formerly Army, Kentucky Army National Guard, and active duty Air Force for a while, getting some of that experience in there, I've kind of had to modify our training efforts to a virtual platform and how we do that. So in order to do that, we kind of started thinking about reverse engineering and how to modify our drive for that premium veteran military spouse talent, within the Guard and Reserve and so forth, transitioning and all of that. So we began by inviting and meeting Guard and Reserve members to like a virtual platform through informational type sessions, then onboarding them, training them, and so forth. We're still at that, position today, but and we found out that production and all that, and our veteran members, to include our Guard and Reserve, are just blowing it out of the park right now. It's just, it's a home run. I'd say being inclusive of our employee referrals to leverage their veteran, Guard and Reserve, military spouse connections has been probably our number one way to meet great talent in the veteran space, in the Guard and Reserve space. I mean, you think about it, what better way than to have an employee who comes out and provides that positive insight, to when someone's seeking employment in that space. But I think other ways that what we do as part of our, the wickets that we go through is obviously building those relationships and partnering with the ESGR. A shout out to Peter Kaspari in Florida, where we have our main operations center with the ESGR. He's been phenomenal. He's always communicating and is very clear about when he's on the clock and when he's off the clock and what he can do. But very good, because there's a legal consequence, I think, to some of that. We also partner with our DevOps, our leavers, some 501c3s. Wounded Warrior Project is a good one. We attend virtual employment sites. We build our relationships at those. Prior to COVID, we built out relationships at the Guard and Reserve family support teams. And then they posted out to their members as well, if their spouses or their members are looking for, roles out there. We've modified a lot of our roles to be more virtual. Again, we've noticed that our production has gone up. We still attend virtual employment sites, job boards, that typical stuff. Contract conversions, if we have some tips come on, of course, that again, we're out there looking for Guard and Reserve just as much as any veteran and military spouse. Recruiter direct sourcing, vendor referrals, those type of things. But basically, I can tell you that the impact has definitely put a strain in general on our recruiting efforts, but we have learned to adapt. And luckily, our IT infrastructure was solid, and it allows us to perform, still perform those high value, high touch interactions with what we do. But since the COVID-19 restrictions have been put in place, we've still been able to move the needle, particularly in the Guard and Reserve space, from 4% to 10% more veterans in general, kind of lump them together, just in the 6 months, at 10%. I mean, we're moving the needle, and we're building things because we're a small but growing company. We're really building out our ERG model. We're looking at some of the buddy system and some of those things as well. But thank you. Thank you for that question.
My pleasure. And just to follow up with you, I'm assuming Benelink, pardon me, does have an active employee resource group for your veterans and serving Guard members, yes?
Well, let's just say we're building it out right now. So I would have to say no on that completely. We have the SharePoint site ready to go. We have members that are named on there, but we're building our allies in there as well. So literally had a partnership meeting with our CFO yesterday to see about backing. So I think in one of the other panels, you're always communicating, you're getting leadership buy-in first, you're doing all of those things. And then once we have everything put in place, it's going to be rolled out to the remaining part of our colleagues.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
The last question that I'm going to ask to our I've saved the best for last, Michael Bianchi, and this question sort of builds on the previous two panels. The first one led by Jared Lyon on Student Veterans of America, and follows up with the one led by Brando on the military spouses. What I would like to do, Michael, is ask you this question. We know academia is a great landing spot for a lot of transitioning veterans, both to further their education, but also to become teachers or instructors or professors. This is important for their family members as well. We realize that across the board, and it's becoming a bigger issue. So from your perspective, Michael, what are the most significant issues that our reserve component members face? And equally importantly, what are the most significant issues and obstacles faced by their spouses and family members of the veterans and guardsmen and reservists?
Sure. Hey, thanks, Bruce. I appreciate it. Thanks for the question. So I think it's good to build off of the previous panels, as you said. And I think really to start with, it's not much different from all the other challenges that occur from anyone really selecting a university or college to attend. And that's really sort of the paradox of choice, right? We have so many choices available to us as guardsmen and reservists. In some cases, you're limited to your state or territory where you're drilling or where you live or where you reside. But really sort of those navigation of services that we talk about, and what is really the best place for you and your family to attend as a student. And a guardsman and a reservist, they come in different categories, right? So you have full-time students, the younger population who may be attending university and college while they're drilling, or they may have attended for the education benefits. And then you have folks that are full-time employees and working on their education part-time. So it comes in a number of different ways. And I think all the folks on this call have contributed to really breaking down those barriers where, if, as George mentioned, the Mill Times Best for Vets, sort of lays out a roadmap for success to understand the barriers by mapping them, right? And as you look at, the Student Veteran Association with IVMF, and Purdue with their military family research, they established the National Veteran Education Success Tracker. So what does it mean for somebody to be, what are the chances of someone to be more successful at a university? So we look at these different things and we look at, does the university have a veteran center that understands? Is there dedicated space? Do they accept tuition assistance, which is a big deal for Guard and Reservists because it's an underutilized resource for the National Guard and Reserve. You know, the active duty has that as well as the National Guard and Reserve. You know, is there a gap coverage for the GI Bill? What's the veteran retention rate at that school? And most importantly, really, what is the graduation rate for that school for those that enter with a military connection and actually leave? So those are some of the outlines that can be provided, and I'll push that into the chat from the Mill Times. Best for Vets. It really outlines those different places that operate as the best for vets. And as you mentioned earlier, you know, states and territories, as I mentioned, it used to be you were geographically constrained to where you wanted to attend a university or a college. Now, really, with the opening up of the online learning systems across the board, that was beginning to occur before the pandemic, now are in full swing. You know, you have all those different opportunities to defeat those challenges for those that are wanting to attend. So if you want to attend a university that's not in your state, and because they're on the list or not on the list, and you know, it's not an all-inclusive list, but you can certainly do that. You know, for example, and again, I want to be very clear, we're not the only ones, but I'm very familiar with this program because it's above, you know, it's the logo above my head, you know, but Syracuse University has opened its doors to, you know, offering tuition assistance rate at a private institution for National Guard, Reserve, and for active duty members. And there's a number of other locations that have done that. So in talking about the barriers, I think it's important to talk about the opportunities that are being opened up more and more every day to those National Guard and Reserve, because they can take advantage. So it's awareness of the programs, and it's time or access, if you will, for the employers on the call. So what are the employers willing to do to allow for time for that sort of educational experience to move that person into the next level of responsibility, be it a spouse or be it a service member? How are you going to, and the affinity groups that I've heard mentioned at a bunch of locations. I know, you know, Jim at Prudential does a great job. Harris, they've all done fabulous work in establishing these affinity groups. And this is where the awareness comes from. This is what the ecosystem that Christopher Plamp was talking about. And then lastly, I would say another barrier that is being broken down is the credentialing opportunities that are open to National Guard and Reserve as well. So the credentialing assistance program can help. It'll help not only the National Guard and Reserve in their pursuit of meaningful employment if they don't have it, but it'll also assist them in professional development and growth while they are in their current position. And, you know, Onward to Opportunity is one of those programs that offers that. But additionally, like I said, credentialing assistance can provide that through their status in the Guard and Reserve. So, you know, what again are the employers able and willing to do to provide those opportunities for those service members or those, you know, part-time citizen soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen to do and to go and take advantage of those opportunities. So, you know, I think it's important to note too, you know, we talk about cultural barriers, you know, from the active duty transitioning side, moving into the university. You know, it may not be such a barrier for the National Guard and Reserve who are residing in the community already, right, for the majority of the year. And I think that's an opportunity to seize the advantage on that and really bring some of that cross-cultural competencies to the population on the campuses. So, you know, again, the challenges are not unique, I think, but I think there are some posed by the National Guard and Reserve by the status of that. But given all the work that's been done by many folks on this call as well as others to start to break down those barriers. I think for now it's really navigation, access, and awareness. I would put those three right there as the top three barriers, but all of those are very, very we can overcome those very easily through this team here.
Thank you very much, Mike.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. If anybody has a question for me or any of the panelists, please put it in the chat, and Altman will answer it. I do want to expand a little bit before I pose the first question to the panel. You know, the reserve component, I mentioned earlier that they've been constantly mobilized and deployed in support of national defense interests going overseas. But our National Guard and Air National Guard members very frequently get called to state emergencies or state missions, such as putting out or assisting with putting out forest fires, or we've had some mobilized for border security. And right now, as we're all aware, a lot of our National Guard members are being called upon to help unrest and stability around our country. So leading into that, we have the law that I mentioned, Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. We call it USERRA for short. Lacey, I'm going to start with you on this. What is the most part of the USERRA that employers will have the most trouble with?
I think you cut a little bit out there. It was, what would you have the most trouble with? And there was a part of it I didn't hear.
Right. What part of complying with USERRA would most, in your opinion, do most employers have the most trouble with?
I think probably I haven't ran, luckily, in the 5 years I've been with Excel, I have not run into many problems at Excel, but as a first sergeant, I do hear a lot of my soldiers' issues during drill weekends of some of the issues they run into. And I think they do forget that, National Guard service members do have those local types of orders that they will be called on, which are different than those federal orders. So state active duty does have a different order title than active duty. So, that's kind of in the details, but I think a lot of folks don't realize that. I think that is where a lot of folks will get hung up, and a lot of folks have issues with their company as far as what does the company cover for Title 32 versus, something that is state active duty. So I would say that is an issue by company that I've heard from some of my own soldiers in my units. At Excel, we just take it across the board, regardless of, the type of orders. It's just going to be, if they're mobilized for any reason, whether it's for training, entry-level training, boot camp, AIT, an active duty deployment overseas, or what have you. But I would think that is probably one of the major issues that folks have. And the other thing that folks have been activated for right now for state active duty is actually COVID response. So there's another one right now that we have been seeing a lot of our soldiers mobilized for in my unit as well.
Boy, how could I forget the COVID response? Thank you for bringing that up. And to everybody, I apologize if I cut in and out a little bit. I live way out in the country here in Virginia, so sometimes my internet bandwidth is not the greatest. The next question, I'm going to give this one to Jim Morbach. Jim, your company seems to do a great job with this. So what should employers do to support their reserve component employees who get called to active duty, and more importantly, what should they do for?
You cut out that last part of the question. Could you say the last 2 sentences of your question, please?
Yeah, what should employers do to support their employees who get called to active duty, as well as supporting their families?
Oh yeah, like Lacey just said, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we had a lot of National Guard and Air National Guard members deployed, for civil unrest and everything else. So on the driver's side, each driver has a fleet manager, that's their connection, that's their liaison between professional driver out there on the road, and then everything from our internal processes, and then plus all that information goes to our Operation Freedom team, our internal associates who run the military programs, And, they'll, depending on the length of the mobilization or deployment, we'll reach out to those members and their families to make sure, hey, are you okay? Is there anything we need? It's just, at the end of the day, we have to be 100% supportive. And our culture at Warner Enterprises throughout our entire worldwide organization is we're going to support the members of the National Guard and Reserve, and whether it be deployments or mobilizations or your weekend drills. I have somebody on our team that's been mobilized for almost 2 years right now. And when that person comes back, they're going to get every raise, bonus, everything that they missed out of when they come back. So we just got to make sure we take care of those. And it's it's just like I said, a culture, getting out to the folks, and we don't have any issues. We got drivers out there on the road that were maybe over the road drivers that were on the East Coast, and they also got mobilized, had to be the West Coast. I mean, we'll mobilize and make sure they get immediately back to their home so they can get their gear and report to base.
All right, thank you. Well, we're about 2 to 3 minutes from the end of our allotted time, so I want to give each of the panelists just a chance to go ahead and close this out. Jim Morbach, I'll start with you, and then we'll turn it over. I'll bring it back in and let everybody else finish.
Just want to say thank you. I learned a lot during this panel. I really wish we were in New York doing this in person like we were supposed to back in April. This is kind of a bummer, but just like in the military, just like worldwide or real world, you adapt, overcome, and improvise. And this is the world we live in right now. And if there's anything I can do for anybody, please let me know, or I can have a member of my team reach out. But appreciate you all. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. James Tongate, your closing remarks, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. So just the quick story, I was fortunate to use, going back a couple of times, I was a loadmaster for a lot of my career in the Air National Guard, C-130, so we got to do a lot of boss lifts. It was just phenomenal success in everything from start to finish, and we included the Army side of it as well, the Army Guard side. I also, unfortunately, in the early 2000s when we were deployed for the invasion of Iraq and all of that, a lot of employers at that time didn't know what to do with USERRA. They didn't understand it, some of that. My employer was one of them at that time, not the current employer. But so I used the ombudsman through ESGR, and through all of those actions, it took probably about 3 to 6 months to get everything through upon my return. But I was able to help educate those internally about the resources the ESGR has, whether it's employer outreach to the ombudsmans and other things that they have. So, if you don't know enough about it, I definitely, you should empower yourself to educate and share that with your internal hiring managers and get that information to them at esgr.mil. But other than that, thank you. It's been an honor to be on the panel. I look forward to meeting everyone in person, hopefully next year. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Lacey, you're up.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I love learning from other companies, seeing what other ideas folks have. And honestly, I think any of these conferences, whether they're virtual or in person, preferably in person, are always really great for networking. I got a couple of emails, happy to reach out with other folks further. Looking forward to learning from a lot of you folks. And truly, as a National Guardsman myself, I think these are phenomenal employees that you can have. They're always going to have some great perspectives, outside the box thinkers. And for the 2 weeks you may miss them during the year, it is very well worth it for what they will bring to your team.
Well, thank you, Lacey. And I'm a retired soldier myself. So is it too forward of me to refer to you as top?
It kind of makes me feel old at that point. I feel like once you hit that role, you feel very old. And I will say it is no longer a weekend job, especially the more senior you get. As a first sergeant, I will get, soldiers calling about personal family issues, financial issues, people in hospitals, people that need help with COVID response and childcare. And, then you have your planning for the rest of the year. So it's been very taxing, but I think those are all things that help contribute again to my current role, project management. So I'm always learning, and again, it's been a great experience.
Thank you. And Mike Bianchi, yours to close us out.
Okay. Oh, it's tough. That's a lot of pressure. Okay. Thanks, Bruce. So, and thanks to my fellow panelists, and I really appreciate your comments. I think I would just close with a couple of other comments from, for example, Chuck Bunch and Christopher Plant, who talked about the ecosystem and collective impact and collaboration, right? So from the minute somebody raises their hand till the time they depart service, or they say I do if they're a spouse, they're in the community, they're in the family, and somewhere in between that employment for the employers on there is education. And so as part of that, in particular for the Guard and Reserve, it's important to remember, you know, let's not overlook what we need to do to ensure we're continuing to educate and provide professional development and growth opportunities for this population. And I don't think it's past anyone on this call, but just for the folks that may be listening who are employers. But thanks again, and I appreciate you letting me be on.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you to everybody. I'm going to close this out. Thank you for inviting me from ESGR here. I will just tell everybody we have a lot of resources available to you in the private sector and the government sector, and we would be happy to support you and your reserve component employees in any way that we can. I will post my contact information in the comments in just a second, and to me or team members about a statement of support with ESGR. It's a great way to show your active support your reserve component employees. George Altman, thanks for the invite, and back to you, sir.